Good afternoon. The wonderful thing is listening to these two ladies sing, isn't it? From a personal thing, the terrible thing is I have to follow them. Thank you, ladies. Several years ago, I was part of a Missouri district effort called Peer Ministry Training, teaching and working with high school students, and we had them at a grouping up outside St. Louis, and there was this one young lady that stopped me over the course of the weekend. She said, "Mark, can I talk with you a minute?" I said, "Sure." And we got to a spot and sat down, and she started telling me what she was struggling with, and there was some pretty significant stuff. There were some family dynamics she was struggling with. There were some dynamics with the school and some of her non-church friends that she was having to struggle with. And it was kind of significant. It wasn't call police significant, but it was significant enough that we sat and talked for a couple of hours going through. And in the course of the conversation, I said to her, "Well, what resources do you have?" And she goes, "Well, I'm alone." Now, I knew enough about her congregation. I know that she has a great youth worker because I've sat down and talked with her. I also know that they have great youth in that congregation because for the last 2 or 3 years leading up to this, I had seen some of them come through my peer ministry training. And I said, "What do you mean you don't have any resources? I know your congregation. I know some of the kids." And she goes to me, "No, none of them would understand this." Wrong. "None of them would understand this. I've got to do this alone." Well, it took us a while to get off of that statement. We have this impression sometimes, and she wasn't alone. We have this impression in our lives today that some of the stuff that we're going through, we've got to do this by ourselves. This individualism that has crept into our American society has invaded our churches. And I'm sorry, it's invaded our spiritual lives as well. Because what we've done is we've traded relationships for connections. We've traded investment for convenience. We've traded conversations for information. And that's all led us to a simple philosophy and a simple look at life that says, this is me against the world, or it's me against God, or whatever struggle I'm taking place in my life, I've got to do this by myself. I shared with you in these Wednesday nights, if you've been with us, some of the things that I hear going through and dealing with people. One of the things that I hear a lot is going through with people is I ask the question, so how can we help? We being St. Andrew, we being this community, how can we help? And they'll go, "No, I'm good." And I'll go, inside my head going, "No, you're not. But we'll let this go for a while because I'll come back to it at some point in time." It's this idea of individualism. And what we need to remember is we need to remember the word, it's out on the banner. We need to remember community. We need to remember what community is. I think that's a struggle for us today because it's such a strange concept, remembering what community, understanding what community is. So let me give you an illustration of community. This is a story actually I heard at my prior congregation. There was a guy out, it was a farm community. And he was living out in a farm community. He'd lived there many, many years and had grown up kids and knew the people in the farm community that were out there and had friends all in that farm community. And what had happened was the man came down with cancer. And he was getting the treatments, and he was going through chemotherapy. And anybody who's known somebody who's gone through chemotherapy, it's not pleasant, and you basically spend weeks in bed trying to get the strength to get up to go to the next chemotherapy treatment, and that's kind of what his life was. But the only problem was for him, harvest was coming. And he had many, many acres planted. And he didn't know what he was going to do. So one Saturday morning, and they said it took a little prior arranging, one Saturday morning, all his neighbors showed up. They brought combines, they brought rakes, they brought trucks. All the wives showed up as well with cleaning supplies, and they cleaned the house top to bottom. The wives sat out in the kitchen and cooked like crazy. The teenage boys showed up as well, and they did all the chores around the house and around the barn that couldn't take place, and they knocked the whole thing out from sunup to sundown one day, bringing all his stuff in, all his crops in for him. That's community. That's what community is when you're there for each other. And community means we're investing in the lives of others. Investing in the lives of others. You sit and you think of investment as you long term. You put your investments down and you hopefully make them when you're young and you retire on them and they grow. That's what investment is. You're investing in the lives of others, in the people's lives, that you're there for them and you're going to help them go through life no matter what they're dealing with. But the flip side of that word investment in lives of others is you're letting others invest in your life. It's that admission that we need people in our life. And we need people who go through life with us. And no matter what that struggle we have, that you might have in life. And we've been talking in the series in silence about those times when God is silent. It can be those times when God is silent as well. This individualism says we have to deal with that struggles. We have to deal with those times of God's silence. We've got to do with this by ourselves. But you see, God never intended us to go through life by ourselves. God never intended us to have this Lone Ranger concept of life and faith. God never intended us to do it alone. God intended us to be in community and to do it with others. And that's what this psalm is about. Verse 1, grab your bulletin. I'm just going to show just a couple of passages that he's talking about. Verse 1, because it's all through here. He says, verse 1, give ear, O shepherd of Israel, you who lead Joseph like a flock. Notice he uses the word flock in there. Word Joseph, he's talking the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the children, the families. He's starting off this psalm talking about this family of God. He's not talking to David individually. This is a psalm about the family of God, the patriarchs, and all of their children, including us, by the way. Verse 3. It's one of those things you don't see in the Psalms very often. It says in verse 3, it says, restore us, O God. That word us, that's a correct translation. That is the first person plural. He's talking to the family. He's talking to the community. He's talking to the people of God. Verse 8, you brought your vine out of Egypt. That's the Exodus. It's a clear reference. What he's talking about is that where God is helping, God is present, God is listening, God is speaking, God is with his family. That 600,000 men and women, 600,000 men plus women and children who God led as a body, as his family out of Egypt. He's with that family. And he's with his people of God. But there's one in the New Testament as well. Won't take you over there. One in the New Testament as well. It's Jesus. Have you ever stopped and looked through the Gospels as Jesus is entering the Passion Week between Palm Sunday and Good Friday? How much time Jesus spends with his disciples and how much time Jesus is talking to his disciples. One of the reasons he's doing that, he wants to make sure they're prepared. Jesus is taking care of his family. And not only is he taking care of his family, he's setting them up that they can take care of each other. As we face those times of struggle, like this teenage girl did, and I finally got her to the point where she we sat down the next day with her DCE. And I said, you need to tell her the story. And by the end of the weekend, the DCE had brought a couple other teenagers into the story. They built a community around her. God intends us to go through life in a community. In the struggles we face, He intends us to do it in a community, in a family of God. And in those times when God seems far away and God seems silent, it's only us. I'll say this again. God's not silent, it's only us. But He intends to be in community as we live in those times. Amen.